of Northern Ireland, and of course fellow GB News presenter Dame Arlene Foster. Been there, done it in these occasions. Just remind folk at home why Chris doesn't actually have much choices in terms of eventually coming before the camera to say there will be elections on the 12th of December or whenever.
Yeah, because that's what the legislation says. After 6 months since the last Assembly election, if an executive hasn't been formed, then the Secretary of State is under a duty to call another election, unless he takes powers not to call an election. Of course, Parliament is supreme, as you know, Alistair, and they could decide under a new Prime Minister not to call an election. But it's more than likely that he's going to announce that there will be an election. And I thought it was very interesting today, Alistair, Bertie Ahern, who you will know, used to be the Taoiseach, the Irish Prime Minister back in the day, made a comment today which I thought was very telling coming from that source. He said, an election won't change a damn thing.
No.
And that's the point. It's going to be a very costly election. It's going to alienate people even more in Northern Ireland, I would argue. And yet it's coming in the days of Christmas.
I put it to Nigel Dodds earlier on the programme that it might just change in one way. I mean, I completely accept what Bertie has said there about the protocol and the legislation that sits on the stocks in Westminster and what have you. But one thing that might change is that the DUP could be hurt by these elections of having to go into polling again, because the movement of travel north and south of that border is for Sinn Féin at the moment, becoming the biggest party hand over fist.
Well, I think most people are saying, yes, Sinn Féin are going to do well out of this election again, but the DUP will also do well because the middle ground will be the place that will be sacrificed. So the SDLP and the Ulster Unionist Party, those parties who used to be the largest parties, nationalists and unionists in Northern Ireland back in the day when I first started in politics, they will be the ones that will suffer as a result of this election, because people will go to either side, if you like, and so the DUP may well pick up votes. And don't forget as well...
because the Alliance did quite well last time, funnily enough.
They did, but the TUV, which viewers and listeners may not be familiar with here on the mainland, actually gained 60,000 votes in the last election, and they're to the right of the Democratic Unionist Party, and I would think that quite a few of those votes will probably go to the DUP in this election. So it'll be an interesting election from that perspective. There won't be that much movement, I don't think, in the number of seats, maybe one or two here or there, Alistair, but I don't think, I do agree with Bertie Ahern, and people watching will say, Arlene Foster's agreeing with Bertie Ahern. Yes, I am. It'll not change anything.
Intriguing. The other thing that Nigel said, and I wrote it down immediately, he said it because I thought it was very interesting, he was talking about that there is legislation in Westminster about Article 16 and about tearing up the protocol and walking away from it and what have you. And he gave a very strong health report on Liz Truss and her approach and attitude towards these matters, both as Foreign Secretary and briefly as Prime Minister. On Rishi Sunak, he said, that remains to be seen.
Well, it does remain to be seen, because during the leadership election, which we felt was going on for quite some time in the summer, Liz was very clear. Liz Truss was very clear in relation to what she would do around the protocol. She went so far as to say that she needed to deal with the European Court of Justice's remit in Northern Ireland as well. Rishi Sunak was not as clear, and therefore I think that makes a lot of unions quite nervous in relation to what's going on between himself and the European Union. The protocol bill is in the Lords at this present moment in time. It'll come back to the Commons. It'll probably ping-pong a little bit between the two, because there are a lot of peers who are against the Northern Ireland Protocol Bill. If the government are going to use that as a negotiating tool and say to the European Union, we have to have a negotiation here, because let's be honest, Alistair, the European Union have not changed their mandate.
No.
They haven't changed their mandate. So when people talk about, let's have I listened to Peter Kyle, the Shadow Secretary of State, this morning saying that there hadn't been negotiation. You can't really negotiate if people haven't changed their mandate and they're sticking by what they said right at the very beginning.
But I think Bertie was referring to it in that statement you began our conversation with, and you've alluded to it, that there isn't anything to change, that the Republic of Ireland is a part of the European Union, the single market and all the rest of it. Northern Ireland is part of the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom voted for Brexit. Therefore, there never the twain shall meet. Therefore, the significance of that point from Nigel about it remains to be seen with Rishi Sunak is it going to be a case of see you in the international courts?
Well, the reality is, of course, we didn't have to be here in relation to the protocol. There were other ways to deal with goods coming from Great Britain into Northern Ireland and then on.
But Arlene, we are where we are.
We are where we are, but we could always go back to that position, and that is the realistic position, to allow trade to go through that needs to go into the Republic of Ireland. It is checked, but goods that are coming into Northern Ireland solely for the use of people in Northern Ireland should not be checked. And therefore there is a fundamental problem there, and it goes to the sovereignty of the issue as well. It's not just about goods moving about, it's about identity and it's about sovereignty. And
but if that's the case, then why doesn't Chris go down that road rather than go through the agony of the poor folk in Northern Ireland having to trudge through the rain and the sludge and the rest of it, to have elections that, as you yourself have just said, probably ain't going to change a great deal. It might be a few seats here and there, but the balance between the two top jobs will remain the same?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I have fought elections in the wintertime. It's not a very pleasant prospect, I have to say. The nights are long, the days are short, the wind and the rain and the snow and everything else is not conducive to calling with people and asking them for their vote. So elections in the wintertime are to be avoided at all costs. Never mind the cost. We're told it's £6.5 million to run a Northern Ireland-wide election. So, I mean, obviously, it'll be up to him. If he decides not to call an election, it'll be a big story, I have to say. It looks as if he is going to call an election. But we'll wait to hear from him very soon.
We're running 16 minutes late, so that's quite a delay. Something may be happening. Arlene, stay